Ourselves moving on to the next part of this session. Session 2, the formal title is Operation Skyhawk, How Cell Phones, Drones Are Plaguing Correctional Systems and What You Can Do to Fight Back. Really, Tyrone Oliver, Commissioner Oliver is our keynote speaker, but Tyrone has taken this and his team in Georgia, really the bull by the horns, have done an incredible job. I think you're going to be overwhelmingly impressed with Commissioner Oliver. When he came to corrections, he also brought with him 20 years of law enforcement experience. That 20 years of law enforcement experience really helped to guide, I think, some of his decisions around drones and the contraband that was coming into our correctional system. Commissioner Oliver's a mover and a shaker. He does an incredible job representing corrections anytime we ask. So without further ado, Commissioner Tyrone Oliver, thank you.
All right, cool. Good morning. Oh, sorry about that. Everybody doing all right this morning? I hadn't had coffee yet, and I'm already speaking loud. Thanks, Rob, for the introduction. Just by a show of hands really quick, how many of you think you have a drone or you know you have a drone issue in your system? Raise your hands. All right, just a few. How many of you don't know? And it's okay if you don't know. All right, good. Well, we didn't know either, and I'm excited to get into Operation Skyhawk here in just a few minutes. I'm going to turn it over to my team to really talk about that, because we didn't know either. And it wasn't until we found out how we realized how elaborate and sophisticated this operation really is, this drone operation really is. As Rob alluded to, I spent about 21 years in law enforcement prior to coming into state government in juvenile justice and now in adult corrections. And what I found out, and let me back up, some of that I spent working undercover narcotics. And one of the things that I found out when I came to corrections was some of my informants reached out to me and they said, hey, we saw you on your news, you got appointed to the Department of Corrections, congratulations. You know the game's changed, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? They said, yeah, we're not selling dope on the street anymore. We're actually selling it and delivering it to your prisons. I said, get out of here. I said, how are you doing that? They're saying about drones. And I was like, drones? And I'm thinking, just like everybody else was thinking at the time, me not just coming to corrections thinking it's like these little drones right here. I'm like, okay, you bringing in a, ounce of weed or something like that. It was like, they started laughing at me. When I got with my team here, and then we started looking at some of the videos and some of the drones that we were seizing or we were capturing, and we realized, okay, no, they're bringing in and they're actually delivering large payloads with the drones that we had. But we still didn't know, or I didn't know at the time, how sophisticated and elaborate this business really is and how lucrative it is. And not to steal the thunder from my team, but they're going to talk about that here in just a minute, about Operation Skyhawk and what we're doing in Georgia to take the fight back to the criminal element. One of the things that Governor Kemp charged me to do was to go after gang and criminal activity, not only inside state prisons, but also outside in the community, and that's what I've done. I take all resources I have available to me, dedicated to this team over here that's going to present, and making sure that mission is accomplished and making sure that we run in safe, secure facilities and also keeping our community safe in Georgia. So without further ado, I want to lend my time to Deputy Director Chase Hallman, who's going to come up and go across and just introduce his team and Operation Skyhawk and things that we've done, and also kind of give a brief overview of our department and just kind of give you the groundwork for that. So, Director.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Chase Hallman. I have the pleasure of working with the Georgia Department of Corrections, and this is my 25th year in law enforcement. Coming from before I came into corrections, I had 15 years, and like Commissioner Oliver said, the game's changed. Just when you thought you'd seen pretty much everything from the law enforcement community, you go to corrections, and it's a whole different ballgame. So just to give you some facts before we go into the presentation about the Georgia Department of Corrections and what we look like. We're the 4th largest DOC in the nation, housing 50,000 plus or minus, depends on the week of the year, inmates, 34 hard bed prisons around the state, and employ around 8,000 staff. Of that 50,000 inmate population, 30% of our inmate population is validated gang members. So that's 15,000 roughly gang members that we have operating in our state criminal enterprises from within inside the prison system. So it's no wonder that the contraband is such an issue because the people inside are calling the shots on the outside. And the violence also from the inside of the prisons spills out into the street, into our local communities. That said, the contraband, what you're about to see in this case, the contraband epidemic that we're facing in Georgia is a multi-million-dollar enterprise a year. You're going to see some of these drops that are going into prisons in this presentation, broken down inside the correctional setting would be $1 million easy, some more than $1 million. Just to give you a little bit of the statistical data that we've seen just last year, we had 384 drone events statewide last year, calendar year. When I say events, that means someone saw a drone crashed, a drone detection system picked up a drone, so we had 384 events across the state. Of that, we recovered 153 of those drones and sent them to our lab. 291 contraband drops were recovered, meaning that someone either crashed a drone in the woods or it actually made it over the fence. They drop it on the roof, the yard, whatever. We recovered that. And in those drops, just not to bore you with too many statistics, just to hit the highlights here, 876 cell phones were recovered that were coming in by air. And here's the real interesting part of it. 341 kilos of tobacco, 133 kilos of marijuana, and 13 kilos of methamphetamine were stopped from going in our prison that's just coming in on drone, not any other method. So it's been very, very effective. And 80% of all of OPS, which is the Officer Professional Standards, so we are the law enforcement arm of corrections in the state of Georgia, 80% of all of our arrests were contraband related. So we had 541 arrests around the state last year, and 80% of those were dealing with the contraband. Like Commissioner Oliver said, the agency, Commissioner Oliver, has invested heavily in technology, and we've been very, very fortunate to be able to exploit a lot of technology, be able to do wiretaps, and we have a big, big team of people around the state that are dedicated to going out here and doing the contraband. I have the distinct pleasure of overseeing as the Deputy Director of our Intelligence Division, which includes 6 individual units. And those 6 individual units, as you will see in this presentation, came together and was able to make this case happen. Those units consist of the Digital Forensics Unit, which is the largest forensics unit in the Southeast. This past calendar year, we processed more than 15,500 cell phones that came out of our prison systems around the state. We have a Special Projects Division, which oversees the development of new technologies around the state, like your managed access, drone detection, flock LPR cameras. So that's kind of what handle. Special Enforcement Section, which worked hand in glove with our Organizing Crime and Gang Unit, which is all of our federal task forces around the state. We believe heavily in being part of these federal task forces to leverage resources from at the federal level to help us with the state, such as overtime, wiretap costs, and poll cameras, stuff that we don't have necessarily the funding to support. And last but not least, the K-9 units. We have 27 K-9 units around the state, and they work tirelessly. There's not a night that goes by in the state of Georgia that these guys aren't out running around in the woods tracking a contraband dropper, whether they're out there trying to fly a drone or throw it over the fence. It's nightly in Georgia. So you're about to see what a multifaceted investigation looks like. We took an approach in Georgia. We included many law enforcement agencies in Georgia, as well as Florida, because we wound up, this investigation took us down here in Florida, and we teamed up with our local prosecutor, or our state prosecutor, John Reagan, who you'll get to hear in just a minute, out of the Prosecuting Attorney Council, assigned him to help us specifically with this case. So with that said, I'll introduce Special Agent Greg Phillips and Special Resources Prosecutor John Reagan. There's another mic up there.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. How are y'all? Thank y'all for having us. I'm Greg Phillips. I'm a special agent for the state of Georgia. I'm also a task force agent for FBI's Middle Georgia Safe Streets Gang Task Force, where I've been in that role for a little over 10 years, and as a deputy sheriff, and then came to corrections back in 2018. And so, 28 years of law enforcement experience. I'm sorry, that light's killing me. 28 years of law enforcement experience before I got into this, and really when I got over here to corrections, my eyes got opened up. And I tell everybody all the time that I fully expect the game wardens to come start arresting us for hunting over a baited field, because we absolutely kill it. Everything that's out there on the streets controlled within the facility, and I learned that once I got started working here with GDC. And so I'm going to cover Operation Skyhawk. I was the case agent for that. I have my co-case here with me as well as one of my analysts. On break, please come pick their brains, pick mine, pick John's. But I want to give them their due regard for being here. But we started this, to be honest with you, it was started by accident. I always say that. The commissioner has shook his head in time when I did say that. But I'll explain why I mention it in that manner here shortly. But I want to kind of cover how we do things. You heard Chase talk about the different units of OPS, but I kind of want to just give a quick breakdown and a rundown on that, of how we attack things. I believe 100% that we're probably one of the most forward-moving agencies doing this and doing it the way we do it, as I move across the state and multiple states teaching and whatnot. So I'm going to get started here. We'll come back to that, but there's going to be all my contact information. I encourage you to shoot the QR code, reach out to me, email. This will be at the end of the presentation as well. If you need to contact me by phone, email, whatever it needs to be, we want to help guide you guys and girls in the right direction. We learned a whole lot of things going along the way here, that maybe we can shorten your investigation up by telling you what to do and what not to do to burn time. Anywho, inside OPS, we have the digital forensic unit. Chase covered that very shortly. Hello. All right. I'm kind of a walking talker, y'all. I need to read some of these numbers off, so I apologize on this. But so DFU was started in 2018, and the key thing I always kind of key in on here is since then, y'all, we've dumped over 72,000 contraband devices. All right, so 72,000 phones connected to inmates, connected to gang members out on the street, connected to your drug smugglers that are up and down I-75, 16, 575, 675, 285, and I can keep going through all these interstates we have in Georgia. These phones get dumped into our system. All right, we have the necessary basis to go after anybody just off of our devices alone. Anybody and everybody calls us. I field phone calls and emails from across the nation, from agents everywhere, because once my counterparts at the FBI found out that they had a GDC connection sitting in the FBI space, man, my email blows up on a regular basis. Hey, can you check a number for me? We can't find it. I kick it over to the analyst because I'm about 1/3 of a whole idiot when you see meet the three of us, all right? If I can't find it myself, I kick it to an analyst, and man, they kick out a report in a matter of minutes, sometimes hours, depending on how busy they are, that details who the callers are, who was utilizing the phone, so on and so forth. So we've got the data set, and we're untouchable when it comes to that. I'll say it to anybody, and I say it all the time. So again, our DFU, state of the art. They do amazing work, whether it's phones, drones, you'll find out here shortly, tablets, so on and so forth. That's just the inside of kind of the intake area. You'll see the drones, how they starting to stack up. I know there's going to probably be questions about DFU. I'll kick that back over to Chase and our ASAC, Bobby Kime. They can really lay down the dynamics of the technology that's in place there. But again, that's just the inside of that. We have the criminal intelligence unit. These are our analysts, the men and women who anytime a phone call comes in, a phone gets dumped, whatever, they go through it, they find it. If I get a device, I can take it to them or let them know that the device is there, specifically what I'm looking for, and they're going to deep dive into that phone and find out who it is and what they're doing. And then they're going to find a whole lot of other stuff that's taking place in that phone, and sometimes that stuff makes me have a headache, and then sometimes it develops into something like this. But these analysts cover multiple prisons themselves, and then we also have a team that are just major case analysts, and they just assign out just to us on the organized crime and gang side. Fugitive unit. These guys, they usually are paired up with the United States Marshal Service. So they work out of the Savannah area, the Macon area where I'm assigned at, and then the Atlanta area. So basically they cover the entire state of Georgia, running alongside the Marshal Services doing that. Our K-9 unit, Chase touched on this very briefly. These men and women are incredible. I don't even think they sleep. There's, would you say 29 teams? 27 teams. And it doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning, and then we show up somewhere, there's K-9s already on the ground. And I'm like, man, when do y'all go to bed? And like, well, we just kind of lay there with our phone on our chest. I'm like, God, you're dedicated. But they are. They absolutely are. So if they're not running stuff for GDC, they're getting calls from sheriff's offices or local police departments who don't, have the opportunity to have their own K-9 units. They're going out to schools, they're interacting, they're doing great, great work. We have a special response team, an SRT team. We have one of the team guys here. If you guys have any questions about that, I remember when I came to corrections, they were like, hey, we noticed that you were on a SWAT team with the sheriff's office. Do you want to take part of this? And I was like, kind of giggled. I was like, what do you got a SWAT team for? It's a prison. And they said, well, you ever thought about prison gets taken over and the warden's getting held up? I was like, oh, no, I didn't think about that at all. It's a great idea. And so since learning more about them, I found out real quick, these are some high-speed, low-drag individuals. All right, I don't know if you can see a lot of this from the back here, but some of the recent accomplishments, South Carolina SWAT Challenge, they took first place breaching, first place sniper, first place SWAT medics, rappelling. They just took first place over the Southeastern Tactical Shootout that was in Georgia. One of the snipers, raise your hand, Adam Baswell. Was that a 1,200 or 1,400 yard headshot? 1,400 yard headshot. Don't piss this guy off. Or if you do, be 1,500 yards out. If you're not real good at math, see part A. Don't make you mad. Anywho, so we use these guys not only for the prison thing, but when I got into this case and we started getting to gang members' houses, from the bureau side, we handle all our own entries and whatnot, probably not in the manner that FBI wants us to on a regular basis, but we do it anyway. And we got to start moving across the state, and it was nice to have these guys to be able to call and go, hey, I've got a house, I've got a gang member, I know he's got guns, do your magic. I gave them the address, they start doing their stuff, and literally I get to show up just like this, the scary guy wearing a suit, and they get to knock the doors in and have all the fun. Excuse me. And I didn't have to worry about any of that. They took care of it. So again, not only do they cover the prison side, they also cover all of our dynamic entry points and tactical arrest and whatnot. We have our CID, our Criminal Investigations Division. We have this broke down into different regions. North region, which is basically around Forsyth, our headquarters, and it moves all the way to the Tennessee line, left and right or east and west, however you want to look at the map. All right. We have Southeast, which covers from that same area back down towards Savannah, all right, over to Augusta and to the Carolinas, and then Southwest. It obviously covers all the way down to Florida and west towards Alabama. And so these agents that are assigned to CID, they cover everything. So if there's a stabbing in the prison, they cover it. If they work that all day long and they happen to be the on-call agent and it's at midnight when they get home and then at 12:30 a contraband call comes in, guess who gets right back out of bed and goes back out there? They do. Contrabands, stabbing, employees that have been compromised, whatever it is, they start the process. Most often they finish the process. Sometimes, depending on how big the scope is, it rolls down and comes into us, or rolls up, however you want to look at that. But the men and women on CID, they're the movers and the shakers. right? They're the ones that get out there and work nonstop and work hard. Our security threat groups are our gang guys, gang girls. Like Chase mentioned, we have 15,000 STG or gang members inside Georgia Department of Corrections, and that's the only ones we know about. So y'all know how that goes, right? If we say we got 14 or 15,000, there's probably a good chance we got 25,000 in there that we just haven't identified yet. So they do amazing work. This is also parts of us that reach out. I'm on the gang unit myself. I'm on the gang unit from the FBI side and the state side. And then when I still have gang questions, they're the ones I go to. They get in there, they interact with the gang members inside the prison. They can find stuff out and talk to them on a level that obviously from a cop's perspective, I'm not gonna talk to them. My job is to put them in prison where they already are, or put them in federal prison, whatever it may be. They speak to them on a different level. They get a lot of good information from them, and then they can also educate us. And so in this case alone, when we got to per se like the Denver Lane Bloods, which we'll talk about that, I'd never dealt with these guys with Denver Lanes. Never even heard of them. I've always dealt with East Coast sets. Right? Denver Lane's a West Coast set. So I had to go to our STGs and say, you ever heard Denver Lane? They're like, oh yeah, we got this, this, and this. We just finished a murder trial. 3 people were killed. I'm like, cool. Can you help me out? So he came in, sat us down. We put about 40 or 50 cops in front of him, and he educated us on Denver Lane Blood, so we knew what we were looking for, knew what we were listening for. All right? Do amazing work. I know I'm going fast through this, but I really kind of want to get to the Skyhawk portion, but I understand without all of this, we couldn't have done Skyhawk. So it's not a me thing, it's a we thing. All right? Organized crime and gang unit, again, this is where I'm assigned to. Anybody that's on OCGU is pushed out to federal agencies. Myself, Bill Schwartz, again, he's my co-case. He's FBI Rome, which is just north of Atlanta. But we have some on DEA. That's where Chase and Bobby got their start as far as task force, right? Or was it HIDA? It was DEA. Again, FBI, we have some at HIDA now. We also have analysts assigned out to HIDA as well. And then we have our special enforcement section, which is, they're part of OCGU. They're just not on federal task force. All right, so they kind of jump quick and start working things, and then they can roll it up to us if it gets a little bit bigger scope than they need to. So available resources that I always talk about, obviously when I'm dealing with outside agencies, like I'm standing in front of you guys, is I want these folks to realize you can reach out to us. All right, we're not the experts, we're the furthest thing from the experts, but we learned a lot along this case, along the way, that we can, hey, tell you to pump the brakes on and go right instead of drifting left. So we push this out to everybody, again, usually when we're talking and dealing with sheriff's offices and police departments in the state of Georgia. We haul all of this at your fingertips. It doesn't cost anything. They're paying us out here to work anyway. We like to work, so give us a call. So, I mentioned Middle Georgia Safe Streets Task Force. I know we got a couple of FBI folks sitting in the room. One of them is a task force officer, one of them is an agent himself. I've dealt with these guys down here in Florida throughout this case. And so I always talk about this. If you're not having your team, whether you're corrections or whether you're a sheriff's office sitting here, be a part of federal task forces, you're missing the boat. And you're missing it by a wide swath, okay? These are some of our agencies that are involved. That's just in the Middle District of Georgia. But again, I'm one of the main ones. I was the first one for the Middle Georgia Safe Streets Task Force that got started. I sit down there full time. That's where I go to work every day. And I can handle state crime or I can handle federal crime, whichever it may be. And oftentimes when we start dealing with inmates that are problematic, or we start dealing with folks out on the streets that are problematic, a lot of times we say, well, let's get them indicted and let's give them the gas treatment. And when you say that, like, oh, God, man, what'd you say? You can't gas anybody. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Let's put them on a bus and ship them off somewhere else. Let it be BOP's problem instead of GDC's problem. Makes a lot of sense, right? So again, I encourage this. This is a force multiplier, whatever it may be. This is in the Middle Georgia area. We have a lot of small law enforcement agencies, 25, 50-man agencies. They don't necessarily have the budget, the resources to do things. We have found at the Bureau, as far as coming from our RA, we are a lot more successful when we get out and we interact with the deputies on the street and we interact with the sheriffs, and they are likely to call us more. And the reason why I say this, and I'll use Atlanta PD for comparison, they have thousands of officers, they have $1 million budgets versus a 25-man agency that doesn't have that budget, doesn't have the resources. We become that force multiplier for them, and we can come in and help handle their cases. And we do. So, part of what I learned when I was over at FBI, or while I'm at FBI, is how to do CAS, Cellular Analysis and Survey Team. All right, these they got some really good experts on the bureau side. I'm like, I don't know, between ankle and knee deep. I'm pretty decent at it, but I could be a lot better. Unfortunately, I've spent the last little over a year writing wiretap, so I hadn't had time to cast a lot. But I have taken this and I've used it for the sake of the Georgia Department of Corrections and to make cases. And so, for instance, Macon County, Georgia houses Macon State Prison. It's one of our wilder facilities, to say the least, all right? It's a big contraband heavy agency, or a prison rather. We have a lot of throwovers, we have a lot of drone drops, so on and so forth going over there. We had a car crash about a half a mile off the prison. Deputies responded, cars flipped over on the railroad tracks. I don't know how that happened. There wasn't any chase or nothing. He literally drove up on it. And there's a drone there. There's dope all over the street coming outside the car. Nobody to be found. So, of course, they go into EMS mode, emergency mode, looking around. Did the driver get ejected into the woods? Is he dead in the ditch? Who knows? And couldn't find him. So agents arrive. They try to figure things out. They run back, find out who the car is registered to. When they call that guy, he says, what's the answer? I don't know, my car got stolen tonight. Typical. Anybody that's been in law enforcement, y'all know that, right? Crime happens, first thing you do is report your car stolen so you can't get tied to it. So he tried that. The agent comes to me and he's like, hey man, you know that phone stuff you talk about, some of that magic, that voodoo? I was like, well, yeah, I guess. He said, can you do that? See if this guy really got his car stolen? So I took cast using his cellular data, all right, and I brought him from the nightclub in South Fulton where he said his car was stolen. That's actually where he left the club before he come to try to deliver contraband. Routed him all the way through Atlanta, Georgia, down I-75 till he gets off in Perry and drives out to Macon County where he crashes his car. And then I find him at the crash site with a cell phone, and then I track him all the way back to Atlanta, Georgia, where he gets to South Fulton, and what does he do? 911. Calls and reports his car stolen. All right, so we put him in jail for not only contraband, but filing false reports in South Fulton as well. Another instance on this was down at Smith State, another very contraband-heavy prison down in the southeast portion of Georgia. Same theory, once that word got out that Greg can do some voodoo with cell phone towers, hey, let's call this guy again, get him to do some work. So, same thing, they get him stopped, however, and he's got a drone in the car and there's no drugs. There's nothing in there, it's just a guy driving down the highway with a drone. So they had a suspect, we tracked down, found his phone number. We wrote cell tower warrants, got all the data. He lives in Alabama, so from the Auburn, Alabama area, I tracked him from Auburn all the way out Highway 96, which is our eastbound area that comes out of Alabama into Georgia, where he travels through Warner Robins. He gets out to Highway 16, which is the interstate down to Savannah, travels down there, exits, gets off, makes his prison drop. I got him on the prison drop itself where he stood when he was doing that, all the way out to where he got pulled over, tracked him down into Florida, back up I-75, and then back home. So we were able to make an arrest on that as well, because we caught him later with drugs and contraband. This was just, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago as the wire was coming down. One of our local agencies, again, I preach on working with our local agencies, our sheriff's offices. I'm an old deputy sheriff myself. I tell everybody that. I'm still a deputy sheriff, and I kind of like to act like I'm an agent every now and then. This agency, Twiggs County Sheriff's Office, which coincidentally is the one that started this whole Skyhawk case, calls and they said, hey man, we got a missing person. He's been missing for 10 days. We've tried everything. We can't find him. Parents don't know where he's at. You know the story. And I said, well, have you pinged him? So, well, we did ping him, but we can't really find out because the ping's showing in the middle of the woods. And I was like, well, that's some ping drift. You can know he's coming down the road. Shoot me your records that you got. So he shot me the records over, and it literally, Bill and John were sitting in the office with me. It took me 10 minutes, and I mapped him coming down the road and where it started. I sent him back that actual thing. And all that was where I copied Google and I put it on a PowerPoint slide and took a picture of it. And I said, start right here at the bridge. He's going to be in the water in the ditch. And about 15 minutes later, he calls back and he says, we got him. Car's upside down in the water. Not the outcome they wanted. The subject was dead, but at least the family had some closure, right? Car was upside down. They would have never found this guy. All right. So again, these are wins by working with the federal partners. Your team members get to learn how to do this kind of stuff, and not only to help your local agencies, help out families with people that are missing, because it's not always the hunt for the bad guy. Sometimes we have to find who's lost, right? And so, again, big wins taking place here. Any questions on that, by the way, before we kind of roll into how we do and what we do? Yes, no, maybe so? All right, speeding up. Real quick, like I said, we have OPS CID, digital forensics outside units, and then OCGU, whether we self-initiate things. It comes into our criminal intelligence analysts. They look at it, kicks it out to OCGU, and then rolls out to one of us at DEA, HIDA, SES, or FBI, and kicks down. I'm going to move through this really fast, okay, so we can get into Skyhawk. But this is kind of an example of what we do and how we get onto somebody. This was actually used, I taught a wiretap class in Savannah, so I wanted to show them how we could find a target in Savannah for them to go after. I just went, pulled up a Crips in Chatham County, found the rolling 20s, found this guy right here and started digging into him. And this was me screwing around on the computer. I didn't even go to an analyst to find the good stuff, okay? I pulled it down. You can see where it pulls off his wall calls. Those wall calls identify phone numbers and addresses, which are usually in the areas where these agencies or whatnot are looking to score gang wins or criminal cases. So that is found. Again, that identifies the phone number, who they are, or at least who they say they are. Our analyst also kicks out data summaries, which is who they are, the inmate's name, nicknames, so on and so forth, along with pictures. This goes in our record-keeping system, which is ACES. And so you can see on this particular subject, we did a quick strike on him. Special Agent Mary Jane, she's assigned to SES. There was a quick strike done in SMU, or our Special Management Unit. They get off of this guy, they get a phone, out of his phone, right? We dump that phone. I'm going to jump through that real quick. And then we can start seeing our Cash App monikers and whatnot, right? So we can see where his money's moving, who it's moving to. It pulls down his social media accounts. He had multiple Facebook accounts, not uncommon for inmates or criminals itself, because they're constantly losing their phones, getting them broke, or they're getting them seized. So they forget their passwords, start a new account. The Celebrate information comes off of this, so you got different phone numbers, who they're in contact with. You can see the gutta on there, so you start seeing some of the monikers used or aliases stored inside the phone. We also pull text messages off of there, so we can actually read the text message that's inside the phone. This is huge when you start writing wiretaps, all right? I wrote over 100 plus wiretaps. I know all about it, and I know that this is a critical portion for me to not only show a state attorney or U.S. attorney, they are already communicating, they've historically been communicating, and this is how we start moving on it. So I know, again, I covered that really quick, but I wanted to get into Skyhawk. Are there any questions on that? Catch us on break, please, and we can kind of elaborate on that. So how did we get into Skyhawk? How do we got the inmates? Well, from a drug cop's perspective, which is where I come from, narcotic side, I started to wonder myself, how do we have all these folks and how many do we have in the system that are drugs, right? And so I started looking at our incarcerated inmates from 2019, 20, 21. You can see the number high, then you can see the number drop. Now you see it start climbing back up. Well, we know what happened. COVID hit, right? People wasn't getting prosecuted. That's why the numbers dropped. But essentially, I was looking for the drug mule connection inside GDC. And you're like, what's the drug mule? What does that got to do with what you're teaching? So on and so forth. It's got everything to do with it because, like the commissioner said, deputy director said, it's a multi-million-dollar business now bringing drugs, narcotics, contraband items into the prison system. Not just Georgia, but everybody sitting in the room. So the drug mule connection in terms of Georgia is Georgia now, Atlanta, Georgia specifically, is what Miami, Florida was 35 years ago. It's the hub, or one of the hubs. Everything's coming out of there, all right? A view from 30,000 feet, looking at that, we have street crime, violent crime, narcotics, gangs, and juveniles. And again, a vast majority of that is directed from inside prison walls. We've had former correctional officers murdered at the hands of inmates in contraband cell phones. We've had innocents murdered by the hands of inmates with contraband cell phones. We have drugs moving in and out on a regular basis. We have gang activity in the streets directed from inside prison. Everything. So that view from 30,000 feet was a little bit of what was taught to me at the Bureau, because from the narcotic side, sheriff's office, I was looking at, let's go make a buy, let's make a buy, let's make a buy, let's get a paper and hit the house. And essentially, I was just knocking the tail off of the snake. Nobody ever directed me to go towards the head of it. We were just a one and done kind of deal. So when I got to the Bureau and I was talking about making a case, my SSRA or my boss there, he says, what are you doing? I was like, man, I'm trying to arrest people. And he was like, well, why don't, instead of arresting 2, why don't you go arrest 22? Hell, man, I don't know. I ain't never thought about it like that. All right? He says, let's think about it from 30,000 foot. Do you see better what's happening on the street when you're standing on the corner? Or do you see better when you're 30,000 feet above and you can see the entire whole city and the network? I said, well, the network. And he said, well, dummy, look at it from 30,000 feet. Thanks. Appreciate the leadership, right? So that's it. Looking at it from 30,000 feet, our prisons control all of this. Let's dissect that view real quick. Atlanta, Georgia is the hip-hop capital of the world, and for nearly 30 years now, okay? We have the world's busiest airport. I think it's 93-something million people traveled through there last year. Serve about 15 interstates. We have 71,000 gang members with 15,000 connections or 1,500 connections. We have 5 operating cartels in the state of Georgia. We're going to talk about that very briefly. Again, catch me on break. We can talk about more about it, but the Sinaloa and CJ&J. When we talk about the hip-hop capital of the world, we talk about drug mules, we talk about drug arrests, so on and so forth. You can look at the numbers and the ages of our inmates and the times that the music is talking about drugs and narcotic use, and it correlates. It just matches. I'm not saying that anybody listens to hip-hop, drugs. We all listen to it, okay? I'm just saying there is some correlation there. Again, 93 million people. You can see here, GBI's arresting 100 pounds of pot, gun smuggling, smuggling cocaine in the shoes, Delta employees fired in gun smuggling case. This is nonstop every single day. Atlanta PD has units there. Clayton County PD units have there. FBI, DEA, HIDA, ICE. Every federal agency has somebody in the Atlanta airport, and they're still beating the brakes off of us every single day. The gangs. These are just some of our headlines. Georgia prison gang killed their own guard. 77 Ghostface gang members indicted. 9 Army veterans associated with Georgia bike gangs. 33 charged in a 333 gang indictment count, so on and so forth. Every single day, this is moving in the state. It's moving from within inside the prison. I mentioned our cartels. You have the Sinaloa cartel and you have CJ&J, which is Jalisco New Generation Cartel. They are the up-and-coming cartel, all right? They're extremely violent. They don't have any problems dissecting somebody rapidly and with a dull knife, okay? These are your 2 operating mainly in Georgia, in the Atlanta area, and they're the ones that are pushing the dope. Why is this important to the Georgia Department of Corrections? Well, we have a tale of 2 criminals. We have El Toro, David Zavala. Chase and Bobby can tell you all about him as well. They were targets of him at DEA. And we have El Raton, the mouse, Oviedo Guzman. Anybody, does that ring a bell to anybody? Yes, no? Is there gas leaking here this morning? I ain't asking for push-ups, y'all. Just give me a yes or no. Okay? Oviedo Guzman is Joaquin Guzman or El Chapo's son. Okay? David Zavala was sitting up at SMU, managed to pay one of our COs, former COs, might I add, $10,000 for an iPhone. All right? When he was taken down and that iPhone was taken away from him, he had been in communications and on the phone with Oviedo Guzman, El Raton. By the way, Oviedo was the one that was on the phone with David during the Mexican Army's firefight with the Sinaloa cartel. Remember when they took him in custody, and then it got so bad because Sinaloa cartel started shooting up the city, so the Mexican army gave him back to the cartel? That's our connection. That's our drug connection. That's in Atlanta, and that's sitting in our prison system, and there's a good damn chance it's sitting in y'all's, and you don't know about it yet. Or maybe you do. I don't know. Okay? But it's important because, again, it's perpetuating the drug crimes and the violence that is in our system and is on the streets. Any questions on that? Let's kick in the Skyhawk real quick. Okay. Skyhawk, investigative review. You know, I mentioned Twiggs County Sheriff's Office. They stopped this car. I mentioned them earlier. A very small agency, a very capable agency. They work I-16 interdiction. They stopped this car, headed towards Savannah eastbound for failure to maintain lane of travel. When they got the car stopped, this was inside of it. Bunch of dope, methamphetamine. There was actually some heroin, fentanyl in there as well. Marijuana, when that picture was taken, they didn't break it all apart yet. We had a drone, multiple batteries. There was some yellow identification stickers. That was kind of one of the key things that I keyed in on right away. To me, it was a way that somebody was trying to identify themselves or categorize things. They get it stopped, and they look in there like, man, this is bigger than we know what to do with. So they called me, and they were like, I need some help. Our office is about 15 minutes away, so I ran down there, jumped into it. I turned that phone into the phones and the drone into our DFU. DFU runs all that information down. It flips over, and they said, listen, it's tied into a couple of more drones that we've already had crashed. And I said, well, all right. Where'd that one? He said, well, it come from Coffee, Johnson, Wheeler, and Wilcox, 4 of our correctional facilities and prisons. So I said, well, send me the information. Let me look at it, because that's kind of odd that we have somebody crashed a drone, and then we have somebody stopped in a traffic stop. And let me put it together. So when I put all that together and looked at all the flights, that's what that girl had flown. And I do say girl. Lone female, making $5,000 to $10,000 per flight. And she's flying them 3 and 4 times a night. So when I got that back, that was my aha moment of, oh God, we got a problem. And I can't stick my head in the sand on this. We got to start attacking it. So as we started looking at this and building it up and trying to put 2 things together, the commissioner and the director and deputy director, they all come down to the FBI office. And I said, hey, this is what we got. This is what we're looking at. It's going to require a lot of work. It's going to require a lot of money. It's going to require a lot of time. And we're probably just going to get some of our own in this thing. And commissioner looked me in the eye. He said, take the gloves off and go to swinging. I was like, oh, that wasn't the answer I was ready for. All right. But we took the gloves off, y'all. And it got ugly for a little bit. All right. But then it got better. So we took the gloves off and went after them. So I took that flight data as we started analyzing this stuff, tying it to flight times, launch addresses, return addresses, where these drones picked up from, where these drones returned back to. And I started going after them with the data associated with our Google and associated with our cell phone towers. I wanted to see who was inside that area each time those drones were flying. It just made sense to me. While I wrote those search warrants and went after them, I also went after this data here. In the middle of that, right there, and right there, is Calhoun State Prison, the wild, wild west of Georgia, y'all. Okay? I made circles in 1/8 increments from around that prison, and I just started going out 1/8 of a mile at a time. And all those addresses that correlated with those fields where these things were flying or where I thought they were flying, I started looking into a system that the FBI utilizes. Again, another way to have a resources there. All right, and then I could start seeing from there who had suspicious activity reports with money, fence-in reports, and so on and so forth. I could start putting things together. And I ain't gonna lie to you, it kind of baffled me why Farmer John got some money off Cash App from Money Mike at 2 o'clock in the morning. Wasn't hard to figure out that Farmer was on the take, right? So putting it together, using all of that. Real quick, I talked about that Google reverse. Don't worry about it. They turned it off, all right? Didn't give us anything anyway. So I had to go after the cell tower data. Again, I did that. When I dumped all the cell phone towers, literally from the top of Georgia-Tennessee line all the way down to Florida where these prisons and flights occurred, it gave me a little bit over 1 million cell phone numbers. That's where my analyst went to work, all right? Because I do good getting through a checkbook balance, much less trying to sort 1,000,000 phone numbers. We sorted that down, flipped it around, started looking at who we were talking to. Now, you can see here, we had the suspect and we had some GDC inmates, and you can see they're in the top, in the middle, and then in the south part of Georgia, southern part of Georgia. And every time a drone flew, these phones were communicating. And I said, oh, okay. We got organized crime, hands down, right away. So, went after it. Right about that time is when I reached out to John. I said, hey man, I got a good group going on. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm seeing. I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need a prosecutor that can travel the state of Georgia with me. And he says, keep me in the loop. And I did. Every time I would write a search warrant or a pen register or whatever it was, I would kick it over to him because I wanted his review. He's the one that's got to fight for me in the courtroom. I want to make sure he was good with my wording, and we would pursue on that. So I kicked it over to him, and we started looking at this. Now, two things that we found out. One was my suspect in the traffic stop here, right there in the blue, right there. She was communicating with inmates, and then there was one that popped up called Thunder Drones. He looked normal at first. It was a business in Georgia, Duluth, Georgia, as a matter of fact. Everything on Secretary of State's, everything matched up as legitimate business selling drones. We found out that wasn't the case. So when I ran his call detail records, I found out that Mr. Robert Schwartz with Thunder Drones was communicating with 19 inmates that I knew about. She was only communicating with about 10 or 12. All right, so I knew right away that he's going to be my hinge point. He's my bigger interest that I need to go after. If I can get to those 19 inmates, I can look and see what else. That also told me that it was a whole lot bigger than one girl flying a drone, that I had at least 19 more. In the meantime, that stuff is going on. We continue to seize these drones here. Y'all, I encourage you on break to come up and see these things. DJI Inspire 2s with the drop kits. We were seizing them by the dozens. Starting to put two and two. We were looking at how they were being packaged, whether they were in boxes or bags or cardboard boxes. We were looking at how the drop kits were bolted on, whether they glued to the side, where they used bolts. Was the cable metal cable, or was it a metal cable wrapped in plastic? Looking at all this stuff, trying to figure out who was our source for these things. You can see some of what I'm talking about, how the drop kits were manufactured. In the middle of that, I wrote a pen register and a trap and trace. Some of y'all guys and ladies in here, it might not make a whole lot of sense to you. You heard it mentioned earlier in brief when we were talking about pen register and trap and trace data used in the drone systems and whatnot. Basically, essentially, this captures data coming in and data coming out. So every time a call comes in or every time a call goes out, we can see it. We can't hear what's being said. That's wiretap. But we can see the data. The cool thing about it is I don't need probable cause to get it. I just need to show that it's necessary. Easy to get. So I went up on pen registers on a couple of phones just to see real time who was going after it. Looking at the pen data, I knew that was going to point me towards a Title III or a wiretap, but I had to figure out which one. All right, by this time, I'd identified a heavy gangster disciple at Valdosta State Prison. Did I want to go up on him or did I want to go up on Robert? Really, I needed to go up on both of them. But for the sake of the simplicity side of it, from other factors with cell phone companies and whatnot, we chose to go up on the inmate first, and then we rolled to Robert Schwartz. All right. Now you can see why this is important. Robert was averaging about 100 to 300 calls and texts a day. The inmate was averaging 900 to 1,200 calls and texts a day, sitting inside prison, utilizing the phone that much. Also going on was surveillance. We have cameras in place. We had pole cameras outside Robert's house. We had pole cameras outside his business in Atlanta. We're watching cameras inside the prison to see if certain inmates were communicating or interacting with certain correctional officers. We're watching all of this take place real time sitting inside our wire room. Did undercover drone purchases. Bobby Kime, the ASAC, very accomplished undercover for narcotics. So for him to go buy a drone, he didn't sweat that at all right? Went in there, made that. Bobby would talk him up to the point of admitting that he knew what he would do, and Robert would get to the line and he'd stop and back away. And Bobby would say, hey man, I'm really thinking about flying something heavy out in the middle of nowhere at nighttime. And Robert would get to the line and then he'd back away from it. So he knew what he was doing, but he just didn't have long enough time to get comfortable with Bobby to build this up. We're running preservations, call detail records, text message content, trying to get that stuff from the phone companies, from AT&T and T-Mobile and Verizon. All this stuff's occurring. It's taking time. This stuff takes weeks, sometimes months to get back. So we're burning daylight. We're waiting on the U.S. Attorney's Office. We're dealing with Prosecuting Attorney's Office. Meanwhile, we still have all these drones, all these drugs being flown in. And we're just discussing prosecutorial issues. And finally, I believe it was Chase that said it, but it was really coming from the director and the commissioner. He said, look, we don't give a damn who prosecutes it. I want it stopped. Clear, sir, I'm tracking. All right? So we went after it and went into Operation Skyhawk. Again, the Title III in the wiretap. OCDEF case, which is Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. Pretty accomplished in writing OCDEF cases, so I wrote an OCDEF. OCDEF kind of covers the overtime for our guys and girls that are helping monitor this, the men and women that are out there on the K-9, the outside team of deputy sheriffs that were helping us, so on and so forth, to help pay back on that. So I wrote that, went up on that. I'm going to kind of really skip over this. John will talk about any of this legal, whatnot. But when we put it together, that's what it's what it looked like. That was our initial spider chart of inmates, civilians, and the ones in purple were probationers. And again, some of the ones in green and the blue, they're actually law enforcement or correctional officers. So we had a mixture of everybody inside there. But I did remember his words, take the gloves off. Doesn't matter if they're one of ours or not, lock them up. All right? So we did. As it grown, that's what it started becoming. It got bigger and bigger. The analysts are working overtime trying to put these numbers together, make the link charts happen, make everything happen as we flip into the wires, and then start pushing it out, who they're communicating with and whatnot. All this is occurring right now, right? You can see everything in the green are drone drops at GDC facilities. We're in the middle of the state at the FBI wire room. Okay, we have Thunder drones in Atlanta or Duluth. We have his business in Doraville, which was about 5 miles apart, but 20 minutes worth of driving. So really it's like being down here in Orlando and needing to go about 6 blocks. Federal BOP was getting drops and so on and so forth. So all of this is occurring. We're starting to run wires. We're running surveillance. We're doing traffic stops, using our K-9 guys, using troopers, using a bunch of deputy sheriffs that were working with us. We got K-9 going on. We're hitting search warrants. There's times that we would be in the wire room for 12, 14 hours, get a call come in, and we'd have to go write a search warrant and drive 2 hours just to get down there and hit the house. And so we were putting things together, running on real time. Those were the times, I ain't just saying it because they're sitting in the room, but it makes a difference when your director and your deputy director and your ASACs are showing up, putting on vest, and going through doors with you. That's important. That's working stuff. And again, not saying that because it's in here, but that's what it took. We didn't have the manpower 2.5 hours away. We had to go do it ourselves, and we did. So all of that's taking place. Well, I realized that I was getting overwhelmed pretty quick. I'm pretty good at running a wire in Middle Georgia. I didn't think I was going to have this much trouble running across the state of Georgia, okay? So I created a couple of group me chats, all right? I don't know if you know these things or not, but I put our local law enforcement guys, we have a thing called the Governor's Office of Highway Safety where they meet up and do traffic network and roadblocks and whatnot. I put this out in front of them and I said, this is a real-time chat and I need you guys to answer me when the time comes because there's sometimes I can't make a stop. I can't have an agent waiting at the prison every time a drone drop is going to happen. I need cars pulled over and so on and so forth. So I put this out. They were a little leery at first. I was very serious about it. So listen, we're not putting memes in this group. We're not joking. We're not putting NCI and GCI reports in here. This is simply for, hey, this is a bad guy coming. Develop your own probable cause, make car stop. And it went out to the ones that were actually out there working hard, getting into trouble, looking for trouble. And so again, a little leery of it at first. But you can see on the pictures in the back, I encourage you guys to go look at those as well. The first time these folks stopped the car and they got 2, 4, 6, 8 kilos of dope out of the car, boom, their minds got changed. And then it became, hey bro, you got anything moving towards me? all right, because they wanted to get into a car chase or they wanted to seize a lot of dope, whatever it may be. So we put them on our team by giving them wins on the street. Also during that, we had to put together a little teaching moment, because as we were having people stopped, they would go, hey man, they got tobacco in the car and they got a drone, but it's not illegal to have tobacco or a drone. We're like, no, actually it is. Georgia has that inside our law. We have very strong contraband laws. So we stopped, we didn't stop the wire, but we stopped momentarily, brought up a training class, and started going out to these local agencies teaching training classes in the middle of this massive wiretap, going out to road checks and standing out there with them, out near prisons, to interact with them, just so they can see it's not legal to have this. Again, we have these strong connections with contraband inside our state law. So we would teach them, and then we would also tell them, myself and Bill, we've ran ourselves ragged to go, hey, if you don't feel comfortable making the charge, you call me. I'll come make the charge. Might be 3 hours away, but I'm coming, okay? And we made good on our word. That was the biggest thing. If they called us at midnight, we went out there. Didn't matter. Midnight, 3 o'clock in the morning, we went to work. You can see some examples. Unfortunately, that drone that I'm displayed with, it got kind of tore apart inside our DFU trying to figure it out and get the stuff down. Excuse me. A lot of these are on display up here on the front, but it shows you how big they are. T3 gang activity, again, you can see we're actually on wires for Insane Mob Piru, Gangster Disciples, Denver Lane Bloods, Mob Piru. There was some GDs down here in the Orlando area, some Crips. It was an interaction of everything. The thing about Georgia is they don't set trip. They don't care. They don't stand on the sidewalk and talk about this is my corner. If they can make $1 together in Georgia, gang ties don't matter. It's all about the green. Okay? So we were hitting them all. When we went down, that was a total of 33 wiretaps. If you've never written a wiretap, you don't understand how huge that is. It's massive. We ran that for over a year. That was 379 days, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, sitting inside that wire room, listening to phone calls, reading text messages, and seeing pictures that come through. With that, we intercepted calls, drug stops, drone interventions, data from drones from these states: Alabama, Florida, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, both Carolinas, Tennessee, and West Virginia. All of that was flying those states and also flying ours. So it's not just a regional thing. It's not just in Georgia. If you're from one of those states here, you have the same problem we got. Okay? These are a list of local agencies that assisted us. You'll see again, most of these are sheriff's offices. They're very proactive when it comes to enforcement, when it comes to stopping cars. If a car chase needs to ensue, it just ensues. It just is what it is. To date, that wiretap, we stopped 2 murders. That's a win, all right? Especially for the prosecutor. All right? 5 aggravated assaults were stopped. We stopped a little over 180 prison drops, seized 151 drones, 458 contraband phones, or drivers as well. Seized 27 firearms, 217 pounds of tobacco, 85 pounds of marijuana, 52 pounds of ecstasy, and 18 pounds of methamphetamine. That was just off the wiretap, y'all. All right? We've got 10 GDC employees to indict. John has the indictments already wrote up for them. I mean, they're looking at hundreds and hundreds of years through this thing already. 2 from the outside agencies, and again, 178 felony arrests. That right there, folks, we managed to pull off the largest gang RICO in the state of Georgia, in the history of the state of Georgia. Corrections did that. That's awesome. If we can do it, you can do it. It's the second longest continuous running wiretap in the nation. We didn't believe it. We looked it up 19 different ways, and we were able to pull it off. So we did incredible work. It wasn't about me. It's a whole team of folks. Whether it's the analyst sitting at the table, the boss is sitting at the table, my co-case who spent the last year living out of a hotel room because I literally jinxed him up, said, hey, can you run down for about 30 days from Rome, help me out on a wiretap? And a year later, he's still in a hotel room. So, Bill, I appreciate you. But again, we did phenomenal work. I encourage you to look at these drones. Be careful around the blades. They're really sharp. I know that. I've been cut multiple times dealing with them. Check out some of the pictures. Catch us on break. Catch us afterwards. Whatever you need, we're here to help. Any questions? I'm going to give it to John. That's you. Yes, sir.
Like I said, my name is John Reagan. I am the gang resource prosecutor for the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia. It's my honor to work with Commissioner Oliver, GDC. Prosecuting Attorneys Council, we're a support agency in Georgia to the 51 district attorneys. Like in Florida, it would be the state's attorneys to the districts. So Greg called me, I called my boss and said, we want to make a partnership and we want to work and we want to attack this together because it's a problem that's affecting all the state. Then we reached out, we looked at maybe attacking this as one RICO indictment. We quickly realized that there was no way that was going to be the case. This was too big. So we reached out to 4 or 5 different district attorneys' offices in the state, showed them what they had. It's the problem that everybody faces. I've got so much crime on the outside, how can I focus on the crime on the inside? That's where the Prosecuting Attorneys Council comes in. I can attach to the offices and I'm free labor. And I'll make that for you and I'll go ahead and work those cases. They were great to buy in, they've been great partners, get with their judges, and we executed wiretaps in the individual jurisdictions, because in Georgia we have to go to the individual jurisdiction, and then we were able to monitor. So, again, that's Greg. So the prosecution, again, I talk about partnerships. It is critical, I've been a prosecutor for a little over 23 years, of getting involved early. And Greg reached out to me early, right after the first traffic stop, and we worked this together. And I invite you, prosecutors, to get them involved early, and that's on us as prosecutors. We need to be reaching out to you and get involved with you early. Because together we fight, this is a team fight, and we fight together. And then so I could spend time in the wire room, and I could learn the names, I can learn the voices, I can learn the data, and then I can be better prepared to be the prosecutor and handle these cases in the courtroom. So again, it's the police-prosecutor partnership. We build it early, we use it often, we get involved, and we attach. I know that we talked with the FDLE, I know down here in Florida, that they have agents that can attach and prosecutors that can attach statewide. I encourage you to get that and make these partnerships and make these task forces that we can attack, because these are statewide issues. The gangs don't care about jurisdictional or judicial lines. They're going to go across and they're going to go where the money is. So what we use in Georgia is we use the racketeering statute. In Georgia, we pretty much copied the federal statute. We didn't think, why reinvent the wheel? So we use the RICO statute. The RICO statute, and I have the actual RICO indictments. I can't give them to you because they haven't been unsealed yet, but I've got them. I'll be glad to show them to you. For the first 2, Skyhawk is actually going to lead to 5 different RICO indictments across the state of Georgia to get all these people. But we use the RICO statute because the indictment in itself has an opening statement built in that the judge reads to the jury, okay? It is difficult to sever. So people come in and they want to, say, well, my case comes off separately. No, it doesn't. You're going to ride with everybody. You're all going to be there sitting together. What we call in Georgia 404B, similar transactions, we can bring them in. Using the RICO statute, if they've already been convicted of a crime, like say one of these traffic stops, I tell my local prosecutor down there, go on ahead and prosecute that, that's fine. I'm going to then incorporate it as a predicate act, and they're going to get prosecuted again, and there's no double jeopardy. Again, no geographic boundaries, so I can bring in, like I said, through these RICOs, and I can bring groups in for these 5 RICOs into individual territories. If I have one person commit one predicate act in the jurisdiction which I start, everybody's coming to that. So we're going to have people that we're going to arrest that have been in Atlanta. For example, Robert Schwartz never left Gwinnett County up around Atlanta until Greg and this team put handcuffs on him, and he got a road trip down to Valdosta, and he got to go to Lowndes County, Georgia. So it has a long statute of limitations. It can go back in time. We can go back in time and use historical stuff. So it's an incredibly powerful statute. What we also do is there's no lesser included. It doesn't merge. I was just looking at the indictment for Kydetrius Thomas, our first target. I think I got through about the first page and a half, and he's looking about 300 years. There are 116 counts in that indictment. Everything I get to put in, there's no issues. I can put in everything so I can attack it, so I can paint the full picture. It focuses the compact case just to get indictment, which is why I tell you, you have to get your prosecutors involved early. And if your prosecutors aren't getting involved early, it's a shame on us. We need to be reaching out just like law enforcement, like Greg reached out to us. There's no double jeopardy. As I said, I can use prior convictions as predicate acts. The other thing that I'm really proud of in Georgia is we have an incredibly powerful gang law. Our Governor Kemp, has been a proponent of attacking the gangs and making a very strong gang law. So the gang law is like a first cousin to the RICO statute, so we want to punch them. So what I do is I do a RICO indictment, and then I use those predicate counts, I move them over, I make them a separate crime, and then I attach the gang statute. The gang statute has 20 years on it. It again doesn't merge. This is why you immediately begin to stack. And then you can attack all the people. So, you have these inmates sitting in jail and they're like, what, I'm already in jail. You can't do anything to me. You're right, I can't, I'm an attack on your sentence, but your brother, your sister, your mother, your aunt, your friends, all the people that are doing this for you, guess what? They're gonna be charged not only in the RICO, they're gonna be charged with this, and they're associates to you. Our gang statute clearly does not say member, it says member or associate. They're associating with you. If you walk like a duck, talk like a duck, you're a duck. Guess what? You're getting charged with the gang statute, and you're now gonna be looking at hundreds of years. And so that is our definition straight out. It is in the code. So we're going to use the gang statute with the RICO statute hand in hand, and that's why we're able to completely dismantle these organizations. That is the quick definition in Georgia, that the gang is a criminal street gang. We define it as 3 or more people. That the associated in fact, that is associated in fact, whether informal, which engages in criminal activity, as defined in paragraph 1 of the statute. Did they commit gang type activity? That they're a criminal street gang, that the defendant was in fact associated. Again, we're very powerful with this. We don't say member, we say associated. So I do not have to show that they were bled in, sexed in, blessed in, anything like that. That they committed the act, and that it was a predicate was intended to further the interest of the gang. And I can show that through the social media. I can show that through how they committed the crime, the brazenness of the crime, like flying a drone into a prison, things like that. And I've got a gang crime. This is what we call the iron triangle in Georgia. Using our statutes, we build this, so we would look at and we're drafting the indictment. We put it against the iron triangle and we show it, so we have it built before we actually even file the indictment. We know we've got it. Again, problems we've had is that we've failed to properly document the gang. That's why, again, we have to work together as a unit. And we work together, like Greg, going over this, spending all this time. Skyhawk started in 2022. Here we are in 2025. We're about to file the first indictment because we've done all the legwork. So it's all put together then. But, the problems we run into in Georgia and I run into when I teach this is that we're failing to properly document the gang. We're failing to establish the criteria for gang membership, that where information is not being disseminated in real time. That's a killer. If you're not sharing your information, not only intra-agency, but intra-agency, you are losing the fight, because we are not having the gang information shared not only department-wide, not only statewide, but department-wide. We compartmentalize things. That's an officer safety issue. So the solution, again, we train, like Greg was saying, an issue. Georgia has a contraband statute. We have a statute that is very broad with tobacco. We had agents that said, well, it's just tobacco. That's not a crime. It is a crime under Georgia law. So we broke down and we taught this. And we have actually in our contraband law, we have a drone section that was put in, again, by our governor and our assembly to attack this. So we have drone laws, the drones and the drugs, criminal attempt. So the packaging makes it a crime, and then it is an obstructionist crime, and it is classified under the gang. So then we can then stack these things using the gang and the RICO statute, which is how we're able to do successfully with Skyhawk. The other nice thing with Skyhawk is that, like we said, it's a RICO case. So you see all these drones here. When we hit Robert Schwartz's house, we took 2 box trucks of stuff. How many drones did we take out of his 80, 90 drones, roughly? 80, 90 drones. We use RICO. RICO has a forfeiture clause. So I think some gentleman asked the question of how I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna forfeit all these drones by RICO, okay? They're mine. I'm going to own them. I filed paperwork. They're mine. We've already talked to Mr. Schwartz. He's cooperated, and he realizes his property is now my property. So you see these drones up here. You see this 3D printer.
Let me key in on that real quick. Not only did we go after the drones, we went after their cars. We
Yep.
seized cars. We've taken houses. We've taken bank accounts.
Yeah.
Everything.
Well-
It's been a big win. It's something corrections has never done.
Right.
We started taking bank accounts.
And we use that through our federal partners with FinCEN. When we hit Robert Schwartz, we took $150,000. We locked down his accounts. And literally, they just transferred the money to our holding account through one of our partner local agencies that's sitting in that account. And Robert Schwartz has pretty much said, yeah, that's yours now. So we hit with this overwhelming force, and we hit with these partnerships, and the bad guys know they're done. They just, I mean, they get hit with this, but all these drones are seized. They're going to be forfeited. These drones you see that we part crashed, people ask, how do we keep them? They're evidence of crime, because in Georgia, having a drone and using it, that's contraband. That becomes mine, just like these cell phones. They become the property of the state. Again, with Skyhawk prosecution, you know, I was lucky enough that Greg reached out to me. I've been appointed a special prosecutor in about 5 different jurisdictions. We're still looking to see if maybe we're going to bring one of these federal, where I'll be appointed as a special assistant. Again, it's the partnerships getting involved. So the special prosecutor, then I can do statewide prosecutions, because again, thanks to my director, Pete Skandalakis at the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, we're able to afloat, and we're free labor. We're a force multiplier to our individual jurisdictions and help them out where they then can focus on other crimes. I can come in and I can attack this, and I can use that, and we use our partnership to do that. And then again, like Greg said, we're a traveling roadshow. I don't know how many miles we've driven, especially Greg, all over the state to get judges to swear us in, sign things. But the judges are more than, you know, once we show them what we're doing, we show the district attorneys what we're doing or what we're willing to do, they are more than willing to have us. And, you know, they're like, please come help us. We're getting calls still with other ones, please come help us. We're not done yet, all right? We've got things, I told you we've got 5 RICO indictments. The first 2 are dropping here in the early spring, but we've got more coming. And then we're projecting incarceration. Everybody's going to jail, especially not only, like even Robert Schwartz, who's cooperating, he's going to prison. Our guards, you know, Commissioner Oliver told us, put them in jail, we're going to put them in prison. And so that's our marching order, and we're going to do it. You know, we're going to have, like I said, we've already had people flip and flee, and I haven't indicted one person yet. But they're willing to cooperate because they know we've got it and they know that we're coming. Like I said, any questions, answers, we'll be glad to talk. I thank you for the opportunity. I thank Commissioner Oliver for the opportunity to work on this case. Greg, Director Wolf, Chase, Bobby, Billy, you know, with all the time, Lisa, and everybody at GDC and everybody at PAC and everybody here. Thank you for the opportunity. But any questions, we'll be glad to answer. Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
So it's not necessarily the pushback that we're getting from them was just some of the data being collected. We're obviously not the only law enforcement requesting data from them at the time. And for instance, AT&T, that was the one. I had to go after his text message records, right, because I wanted to see his content. But because he was dealing and doing so much, he was averaging 900, 1,200. Some days he would have 1,500 calls or text messages coming through. So you got to understand, they're on the phone, on speakerphone, and they're texting at the same time. So when they hit the end button, 20 text messages will drop into your wire system. And then he's back on the phone again, talking to somebody else, texting some more. So AT&T was having a problem collecting that data. We would see on the pen registers, text 900 times. And then I hit them with a search warrant, and they would, 3 or 4 weeks later, they would return 4 text messages. And we're like, it doesn't match. Like, your pen data says this, your text message says this. They couldn't give us an answer other than we can't capture it fast enough. So that was some of the headaches that we had to figure out to get around.
Like drinking from a fire hose, there's so much data coming in, their system couldn't capture it all. And if you look back at some of these pictures you'll see back here, there's one picture where Khadijah's where we hit him. He had a panel in the wall in his prison that he had built, and the amount of cell phones, SIM cards, iPads that he had, and he had them organized. So I mean, he's a communication hub. And I mean, just down there, and this is flowing in, and we're trying to get it as fast as we can.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Maybe there's something I'm not seeing, but how is it that you can make some years to be able to detect more than with the taps?
How are they getting it in?
Well, they make some really getting it wouldn't be at the facility. How come we as staff are not seeing that before the meetings?
Understaffed.
Yeah.
100% understaffed. And 100% understaffed. Now, that's probably something the commissioner would want to talk about, but I mean, we may have so many hundreds of inmates and so many few guards, so they, or correctional officers, they can't be at two places at one time.
No, you're right. I mean, I know every majority, I would say, correctional systems across the country is suffering with staffing issues, and so that becomes a challenge. But one of the things that also we found, not only through Skyhawk, but other drone operations, that they would create diversions. Since we are short-staffed, they'll have like a drone come into our airspace that's not carrying a payload to divert that, because we have to dedicate resources to locate that drone and track it, and then here comes the drone with the payload coming in, and then they'll be able to get it that way. So they're very organized and very sophisticated, and I don't know if you guys want to try to talk about that, or Chase or Bobby want to talk about that part of it, but we are seeing that as well, where they're just creating diversions so they'll be able to get it. But majority has to do with staffing shortages. Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, that's why cell phones inside of correctional facilities are a problem, not only for all of us in this room. They're organizing, they're not only communicating with each other, but they're organizing outside and inside of our prison system. So cell phones are definitely an issue for us.
Real quick, and I didn't speak on this on Skyhawk, but when we're standing up here, if you guys want to come interact with us, again, me, John, Bill, any of us, we spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for these drone detection systems and whatnot, and I'm not knocking them by any means, all right? We need all the help we can get. But all the frequencies that you guys, they're recognizing and whatnot, Rob Schwartz told us, and again, he's the guy that owns Thunder Drones, he just chuckled and he says, "I'll beat them every time." I was like, "How are you beating them every time?" $20 on your iPhone. Well, it's actually $24.99, but it's an app called Lychee, all right? And they go into Lychee, download it, they put waypoints into that, it downloads into the drones, they hit the start button, and there's no more RF frequency, nothing's being transmitted, nothing's being received, and it's flying from miles out. So the smaller drones were, a mile and a half, then they started stepping them up, and then it's 2 miles, 5 miles, and so on and so forth. Now we caught them talking, instead of using the big drone to fly 28 or 30 pounds, use the big drone to fly 5 pounds and be 15 miles away. And again, that's how they're beating us, is a $25 app on the iPhone, or they're 15 miles away where our systems aren't picking them up. And so again, if the systems aren't going off, the COs inside don't realize that there's something coming in.
And they're also doing it, it's not just one operation. You'll have somebody bringing down the load, somebody bringing down the load, somebody driving, and somebody bringing the drone. They meet up at one spot, they're together for 5 minutes, the drone takes off, they all break their separate ways. And they're not waiting for the drone to come back to the original spot. Now they're getting smart, and they take off from one spot and they land in another spot. So it's always like a game of, it's a cat and mouse, it's a shuffle game trying to figure out where these are. And so, but we're having to stay ahead. And then they're dropping these packages on roofs. I mean, they're small. I mean, like 5 pounds, but wrapped up. And these drones are flying so high. These propellers, they've been overdriven. They're fast, so you can't hear them. They're lights, you'll see up here. They've taped off the lights, so they're all hidden, so you can't see them.
Spray paint them black. You'll see that down on the end there. Yes, sir.
Tell them about the violence and the harm.
Yeah, so good point. We really do this when we're talking to our law enforcement partners and we're teaching. But we continually get weapons, all right, not just trying to be packaged for a prison, but obviously the ones that are coming to fly them. They're protecting the load. so they have a gun, or they're protecting the load from us, from the bad guys, whatever. We actually, not we, but it was our counterparts down in Lowndes County. It was GDC agents with Lowndes County. So anyway, they got a 17-year-old with an AK-47 tied to his body with a shoestring, and he was running guard for the Flyers. So that's the kind of stuff we're encountering. Now, I don't know if you've ever dealt with somebody on the street with a gun, but I'm way more concerned of a 17-year-old with a gun than I am with a 27-year-old with a gun. Maybe the older guy is going to have a little bit more thought process going on, all right, where the 17-year-old is just going to spray and pray and let it roll. So during the course of some of these interviews, we also sat down with them, and they just told us straight up, they were like, listen, you guys stopped us. We didn't do anything. We didn't have the guns out because y'all had a bunch of us. But if there would have just been one out here, we would have held court right here in the street. So they're telling us right away, if it would have just been me and you, it would have been a shootout. So bear that in mind when you're out there and you start making these stops and these interdiction stops. They got nothing to lose. Yes, sir. No, everybody's talking about it. They have group chats on Telegram of inmates, and man, we've went all the way into the Carolinas with these inmates where they are communicating in this group chat, and they basically say, hey, we're using an Inspire 2, we're using the Liche app. And then next thing you know, guess what's flying in North Carolina? An Inspire 2 using the Liche app. And so it just gets out.
And they're practicing. They're doing runs. They'll be like, all right, we're going to be at the shop today. We're going to practice flying. So they're not just winging it. Rob Schwartz was actually making hundreds of thousands of dollars teaching flying.
He bought a party bus, y'all.
He
put TV screens in the party bus.
He
would take them to a park and sit in there and fly the drones inside the bus where he could teach them on screen.
Right. He literally had 2 entrances at his business. He had one for, mom and dad bringing Junior's drone that crashed. And then he had what he called the VIP, or the gangster door. And they would go through there, and it was set up to be the VIP experience because that's what they wanted. That's what he was catering to. So it is amazing. His operation was set to that. And he told us all about it. But they're learning, they're flying, they're maintaining, they're getting education. We had inmates sending people to Rob for the sole purpose of learning to fly. And he was paying them through Cash App, Venmo, Apple Pay, to teach these people how to fly drones that he had bought.
And once we took down Rob, it went out to other states.
Right.
Florida, you guys, girls in the room, you've got 3 drone suppliers that are pushing these out right this second.
Right.
We've ran wiretaps on multiple of them, so they're going to be getting taken out of the mix here shortly.
Yep.
But as we take them out, somebody else will pop up, without a doubt. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Hold on.
Start.
Could the FAA technically make some of the prisons restricted airspace for these drones?
So they are. The airspace is protected. That's a great question. We didn't actually touch on that. So what Rob would do is drones from DJI come in, and the airspace is restricted. So the drone is supposed to either fly to hit it and land, or it won't even take off. Rob was going in and using third-party software and mitigating and taking off the no-fly zone. So these things will fly over anywhere.
Yeah, and that brings up a point that we were going to hesitantly talk about, but Rob dealt with a nation from Eastern Europe, for lack of better words, all right? And not only was he mitigating the software used from that nation, he was also returning the drones to where they could be used for counter-explosives and whatnot for activities that are ongoing right now. So we had, it's not just a corrections problem, y'all. We have domestic and counterterrorism and all this stuff that's also coming to play. Also, one of these particular ones, the red tops, they get these things, and again, come and see us after this. I know probably get out and use break real quick, but they're flying these things remote using what we call Raspberry Pis. All right, they put a Raspberry Pi in there. They go to an internet site with a flight controller, and they can sit in an Orlando, Florida, right here in this room, and fly a prison in Southwest Georgia. just like that. And so it's not a problem. What is becoming a problem is some of the devices that we have in our custody at Georgia Department of Corrections have also made flights across the border. So it's being sourced not only for prison drops, it's also being sourced for stuff that's coming across the border. And that really shocked us at first, and then a week later, we caught a Norteño fresh out of California Department of Corrections, all the way in southwest Georgia, making a drone drop. So it's starting to expand. It's getting bigger and bigger. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You had said to the gentleman's question over here about restricted airspace. Were you referring to Georgia Department of Corrections over their prisons? What specifically?
When they disable the no-fly zone, it's everything. So our Georgia Department of Corrections airspace is restricted, but once they disable with the third-party software and disable everything, it's all no-fly zones. So they can fly over Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. They can fly. Yeah, critical infrastructure. They can fly over everything.
Also to add with the FAA, they came and met with them. They came and met with us, and it seems to be with the people that came to us, they're regulatory. Their solution was, well, we'll just pull their license. Our reply was, they don't have them. So it was kind of a dead end for us.
Got another one in the back.
Yeah, I believe there's been some progress on adding state prisons to the list of critical infrastructure for, I think it's 2209, that's going to be coming, pushed again soon. I think that came out in like 2016. The FAA was supposed to put flight restrictions over critical infrastructure, but it's been delayed, unfortunately. But that's going to be emphasized again pretty soon, as far as I know. And unfortunately, it doesn't actually geofence like you're describing, because I think that's just a native DJI function, right? And so they sort of cooperated with the ability as a manufacturer for you to just be able to make that a no-fly zone. But anything not DJI wouldn't be stopped by a DJI no-fly zone, correct? But
Correct.
But hopefully, ideally, maybe you could speak to this, when those flight restrictions are actually added to state prisons officially by the FAA, will that help give you another angle from a prosecution standpoint, like a legal barrier or reason that they actually legally cannot fly there now, whereas before it was open airspace? Thoughts on that?
I didn't know if we wanted Ben to kind of help answer this question for us, so it doesn't get confusing. But what you say?
Unfortunately, not in a ton of detail, but a lot of this is wrapped up in some of the policy and legislative discussions that are going on right now as we try to pass a bill that would actually extend legal authorities to state locals for the first time to be able to operate mitigation equipment and advanced detection. So, complicated picture, but
I know I work at Florida Department of Law Enforcement. One thing that we're trying to do is add on to a statute to make it a third-degree felony to fly over critical infrastructures in a drone, or fly a drone over. Corrections, state prisons is part of that critical infrastructure. One thing we found out when we looked at it, police departments aren't, so we're adding that to it as well. But anything that's a critical infrastructure, I know our governor is very concerned about that, so we are trying to add that onto a statute. So that's one thing we're trying to combat.
Like I said, Georgia, we're lucky because we have a statute that addresses drones, so that's why we're able to attack it.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Yes, sir.
Right here in the middle. Gentleman in the bow tie.
Raise your hand, do a jump jack, something.
Yeah, that light is kind of.
So is this same practice in place for your private detention facilities such as Radif or Robert A. Deaton and Lovejoy?
Private prison.
Yeah, so we went everywhere that the wire directed us. We have different detection systems and whatnot at different prisons. All of them that we have, I don't know where they're exactly at. My focus was where we intercepted, where we could identify the source of supply, and meeting them right there in the middle and taking it off. Because From the street side, when I worked street dope, we could always pick and choose who we wanted to arrest, right? I just need to validate what I said in my affidavit was true and accurate, and that way I could close the case, do the wire, so on and so forth. So we could pick and choose who we wanted to arrest and what dope we wanted to knock off. Well, obviously in a prison, that's way different. We have to stop everything that's coming in, right? So that's why we had to use outside law enforcement, K-9, agents, so on and so forth, because if every time they showed up at a prison where they're waiting on them with smiles and handcuffs, it wouldn't take long for them to figure out we're on to them. But if we met them between point A and point B and a deputy sheriff pulled them over, a trooper pulled them over, man, that's just bad luck. They had another traffic stop come down. So I hope that answered your question, but that was my goal, not so much targeting as where the systems were in place to identifying the source of supplies and negating that, the A and B portion.
We followed the path, so yes, do we have action at private prisons? Yes, I think is what you were talking about. Yes, we did. And yes, so the RICO will extend to those.
Great. Thank you.